Welcome. Today we're going deep into the Gilmore Girls attachment style. If you're a binge watcher of the Gilmore Girls and watching everything all over again, then watch this episode. I want to break down each character. It's going to be probably a two-part episode to really understand attachment theory through the lens of the Gilmore Girls. And as a relationship coach myself, I'm now watching this show through a completely different lens. So we can learn so much. So grab your cup of coffee, get cozy and comfy, and let's watch and learn. By the way, before we start, if you're new here, I'm Jula. I'm the Anxious to Secure coach, and welcome to the Anxious to Secure podcast. Disclaimer, I'm not a therapist or doctor. This content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not intended to diagnose, treat, or heal any mental health condition. If you're in an abusive relationship or dealing with severe mental health challenges, always seek professional advice. If you don't know much about attachment theory, it's a theory about how we attach to other people, especially in romantic relationships, based on how we were raised, based on our environment. So, for example, someone with an anxious attachment style was usually raised in an environment with inconsistent upbringing. So sometimes your environment was very loving and safe and warm, and sometimes not. Sometimes maybe a little bit stressful or anxious, maybe because your mom was very stressed or overwhelmed, or maybe there was this perceived fear of abandonment, like your dad was working occasionally somewhere else abroad and then created this fear of abandonment. Or if you have a disorganized attachment style, so this anxious avoidant dynamic happening in yourself as a main attachment style, your needs were consistently not met, meaning there was more trauma happening. You were more raised in this fearful or chaotic upbringing. Maybe parents or caregivers were emotionally or physically abusive, or maybe they were using some kind of substance abuse, or maybe they were arguing and shouting a lot, which might have created a sense of I am not safe here, my needs are not being met, either love or safety. And the secure attachment style, that is an attachment style where your needs were consistently met. So your parents were consistently there for you, created a sense of safety and love for you. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, their needs were also consistently unmet. So there were some physical or emotional needs missing. For example, maybe your parents were very loving you, but they were lacking the warmth, the physical connection to you, which is very important as well for a child, right? And yeah. Let's just dive in with Lorelai's attachment style, my theory on this. So Lorelai, I would say, has more like a disorganized attachment style, so more fearful avoidant. So Lorelai grew up with parents who valued control, achievement, and appearance over emotional safety. Emily's criticism and Richard's distance taught her that love was conditional. This is classic when warmth is mixed with judgment. Lorelai really learns that love equals both comfort but also a little bit of danger. So her teenage pregnancy, for example, only reinforced this wound. Leaving home when she was 16 created a deep sense of shame and rejection, being like casted out. Even though her parents loved her in their own way, meant she had to really fend for herself. There was a scene, for example, when she was being brought into hospital and her mom was still arguing with her and attacking her. So even in this moment, her parents are not a sense of safety. So that's kind of trauma that feeds this disorganized attachment style. And you long for closeness, but closeness feels unsafe. So when then Lorelai grows up, she does want intimacy, right? But then really panics and pulls away as soon as it gets too close, as soon as it gets to a certain degree. And we can really see this in the series that I think it was Suki who pointed out, hey, isn't this to the typical 6-week mark where you always jump away or something like this. So as soon as it feels too permanent, she backs off and shuts down and runs away. That's very typical disorganized attachment style. So that's why she leans on independence and humor and deflection. These are very protective strategies that kept her safe back then when she was in this very controlling environment from her parents, but later on it doesn't protect her anymore. It's actually more sabotaging her. So this is very typical fearful avoidant behavior, craving connection but protecting against the pain of rejection by staying one step removed, I would say. So here are some of her patterns again. So she avoids being vulnerable. Vulnerability is this huge fear. I can also see my clients, for example, when Max proposed, her panic wasn't about Max himself, but about really this permanent state of, oh my God, I can't get out of there. Is this really what I want? I do really, really love Max and everything is going right, but marriage gonna be locked down. As this classic feel avoidant intimacy feels very threatening, and then not even having a conversation, but in the end she goes through nearly with the wedding, but the night before I think she drives off with Rory all of a sudden and completely runs away again. And it reminds me of the movie of what is the movie with Julia Roberts where she leaves the guys on the altar every time? So, very disorganized attachment style. You want it, you want love, you want the connection, but then when it gets serious, last second, you just run away. And then there's also this push and pull dynamic with Luke, for example. She wants him, but she can't even admit it. This gets me really excited about Luke and Lorelai. Now, when I was actually watching this for the first time, years ago, I was more into Rory because I was younger and her story and Jess. And now, as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm really into Luke and Lorelai's story. So that's why I'm starting with her. But yeah, and you can see really from episode 1, I think, was that Luke had really strong signs that he was already into Lorelai. But Lorelai, until she was able to admit it, I think it was now only in season, 3 or 4, she finally was able to admit it. And first, when Suki was mentioning it, hey, I can see that something is going on, she was completely defensive about this because she didn't want to admit it. Yeah, and then when it gets serious, she freezes up completely and she finds the first excuse to run away. Also, she uses humor as a way to deflect and to mask everything, sarcasm and jokes to really shield this vulnerable side. That's very typical as well. And you want to have disorganized attachment style often masks their fear of rejection, for example, with performance. And then there's a part of over-functioning. So running the in, right? That's very impressive, but that's very much over-functioning as well, of a sense of I have to do this and this and this and this as a way of to stay safe, to really strive on independence, not in a way of, hey, you know what, this is a healthy level, sometimes to a little bit of an unhealthy level. Raising Rory alone, being hyper independent, beautiful traits, but sometimes it can get too far just as a way of I have to do this, and if not, if I have to ask or lend money, I'm a failure, and she's beating herself up, and and this is a FA's way to proving I don't need anyone, because if I need someone, my God, I'm not safe. I can't handle this. I definitely don't need anyone, especially not my parents, the one who hurt me the most when I was younger, and which still, creates this painful memory and reopens up the wound every time. But still, she does want closeness. So everything about Lorelai really kind of screams disorganized attachment style, at least, really, really strong tendencies and longing for love, especially with Rory, so much. But fearing it will control her, fearing of rejection and really loss of independence are really huge signs here. And humor as a self-reliance protect her, but they also keep her from intimacy. So now drum rolls. Are you ready for Luke? Luke Danes. I would say I think he's my favorite character from Gilmore Girls, and guess his attachment style. For ages I was so sure he was an avoidant attachment style, and then when I watched it now again, I was like, you know what, he's actually very much secure. So I would put him in a category of avoidant with strong secure tendencies, and I will go down into a huge breakdown now. And by the way, this shows really that attachment theory is really going on to a spectrum. You can be avoidant with secure tendencies. Sorry, I'm still a bit ill. You can be anxious leaning secure. You can be disorganized leaning more anxious or avoidant. This is all a spectrum. And the most beautiful thing is you can move towards a secure attachment style, by the way. So whatever you think of, I am Luke, I am Lorelai, or I am Rory, you can become more secure. That's the most important message, by the way, I want you to take from this. So Luke's childhood was not shown very much in depth, and that is really the foundation of anyone's attachment style. If you want to know what kind of attachment style someone is, either look at their childhood or look at the person who they attract. And of course, you can also look at how they show up, their behaviors and their fears. So Luke really clings to routine, like, the diner, baseball caps, his t-shirts, order. He doesn't like technology and all of these things as a way to regulate his nervous system. This is his way to feel safe. And avoidants often grew up with families where emotions were not expressed. Reliability is really a way for them to feel safe. But vulnerability feels very risky. We've seen Luke in the first seasons are very he's not very expressive. It takes a very long time to express his emotions until, by the way, this amazing thing happens. I think it was now what season was I on? Season 4. He reads these amazing coaching tapes from someone, and he's able to finally express himself to Lorelai, finally show that he cares, invites her to dates, gives her flowers, and has all this bravery when he really clicks, my God, that is her. But anyway, that's something else. Yeah, by the way, it was kind of a coaching types, these self-help books that made him realize all of this, by the way. But yeah, so in the end, he's able to do this much more, but at the beginning, he's not. So at the beginning, he's much more avoidant, and then towards the end, he's much more becoming secure. So Luke wants love, right? Even like anyone who is avoidant attached, they do want love and connection. But closeness makes it very scary and uneasy if it's coming too close, like, being vulnerable again. So he takes years to confess feelings to Lorelai, not because he doesn't care or because he doesn't like her, but because vulnerability feels too exposed. That's avoidant to the core. Emotions are overwhelming. They are not feeling safe because of what they are used to from their childhood. So he retreats into actions instead. Very typical. Anyone usually with an avoidant attachment style, they're very big on their love language in being acts of service. And even my partner has the same love language. So they'll show love through actions, not really words. So building Lorelai, what was this called when she was going to get married even to Max? And for someone who would be very insecure, that would be like, oh my God, like how dare she? But he does this beautiful gesture. He builds her this wooden craved frame thing for the wedding with little animals and I think goats even. He said, and he downplays himself. Oh, I saw this in this magazine. Basically saying through his actions, I love you, I care for you, even if you're getting married to someone else. Like, wow. Like you can not fall in love with someone like him, right? Even if he can't express it, and even if he's a little bit imperfect. So classic avoidant, intimacy is shown very indirectly. But if you're able to really spot it, you are just seeing it more and more. So he rarely voices his needs, really. Avoidants often downplay emotions to stay safe because it's more comfortable. And when life gets messy, with Jess and April and Lorelai, he then retreats to his diner, to his safe place. And avoidants usually really, they like their routine, they like their stuff and their things as a buffer against unpredictability. All avoidants have this huge fear of commitment. So let's say, when Rachel was moving in and Lorelai was talking about marriage, these were kind of triggers for him, and it really triggered his fear of losing independence. Very typical for avoidant men. Although you kind of notice as well that when Luke panics about marriage and says it's this ridiculous institution, blah 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 blah, towards Lorelai, and Lorelai, oh really? You don't see yourself getting married or things like this. He's then saying, well, actually, I guess if you find the right person and he suddenly realizes, hey, actually, maybe it's not that bad suddenly. But only when he talks to Lorelai suddenly. So you can already feel like, you know what? First, he really wants to avoid commitment. He's very scared, but every time when he's with the right person, like Lorelai, he's able to become more secure and let his guard down a little bit more. So Luke really represents someone very much who has an avoidant attachment style and is becoming more and more secure over time, and it's already leaned a little bit more secure from the beginning. His steadiness, showing up for Rory, and it's pretty consistent as well, and following up with what he's saying. When he says something, you can really rely on him, and it's very protective of he's very protective over Lorelai as well. So that really shows how secure he is and that you can rely on him and you can trust him. But his discomfort with emotional expressions and reliance on routine are really textbook avoidant strategies. So love is safer in rather than feeling and thinking about big moves and long-term future plans. So unfortunately, now we're kind of done with Luke for now, but we want to talk about Christopher, another person in Lorelai's life. So Christopher Hayden. So I think he's more disorganized attached with more avoidant tendencies. So Christopher grew up in a relatively privileged household, but emotional consistency was lacking because his parents were more concerned with social image than deep emotional connection. This has taught him that love is conditional and vulnerability can feel unsafe. So both teenagers were escaping kind of the controlling parental household they were growing up and their expectations, but neither had the emotional maturity or stability to manage this closeness. And then when Lorelai became pregnant, apparently Christopher suggested this secure choice to, on paper at least, to get married, but it wasn't grounded in truth, emotional intimacy. When Lorelai rejected that, he defaulted in his avoidance strategy, and I think they broke it off and he ran off into the sunset, because that's what I now put together. Correct me please if I'm wrong in the YouTube comments, because I think this was the moment when Christopher disappeared forever and he only shows up occasionally during the milestones when Rory has her birthday or something like this. And then Lorelai raised Rory independently. So very, typical for someone who's avoidant, or maybe even have this push and pull dynamic for someone who has a disorganized attachment style. It's like, oh, I want it, but I'm gonna go off, I'm gonna travel, I avoid responsibility just because you rejected my proposal. Not really truly being there as a dad, and also for Lorelai. I mean, being 16, not really living with her parents, and then raising Rory alone during this difficult time, and then Christopher just F's off. No. No. And even when you see later on, I don't know if you watched the last episodes of Rory, you can still see when she visits her dad, Christopher, that there's still some maybe resentment in there or some disappointment that she really wishes, I guess, Christopher would be the dad he never really was for her. She could have been really there years ago when she was younger, and which she was later for a different family. So yeah. So Christopher wants really closeness deeply, and he does really love his daughter Rory and even Lorelai. You can see every time later on during the seasons when then Christopher appears, there's some spark, and Lorelai really, really deeply has strong feelings for Christopher throughout the entire season. However, Christopher kind of, has this push and pull on like, oh yeah, let's hook up for a night, and then I go away, disappear again for good. Like he kind of plays with his charm and with with Lorelai's emotions as well, and gives them hope, and then disappears again. So whenever there's permanent responsibility involved, he kind of panics and disappears. So more typical for fearful avoidant, and a little bit also, more leaning avoidant. He uses charm, likability, and spontaneity. No, he's very spontaneous as a shield, allowing him to connect with other people, but without true intimacy. And he's this cool guy, right? And he has this motorbike and this leather jacket and seems like this very attractive guy. But then he lacks consistency every day, and show that they are occasionally during birthdays, milestones, and stuff like that. And that really creates this deep emotional, okay, why can't you be there more often? And usually that creates this kind of obsession with people when they give you something and then they withdraw again and then they take it away. And I think that's why Lorelai's feelings are also so strong, because when someone gives you something and promises you things and then disappear the night after, it gives you this spike, the dopamine hits, and then the withdrawal is like, oh my God, now you can't have it anymore. So let's talk about his development over time. So at least at the beginning of the seasons, Christopher really demonstrated this push and pull pattern more strongly. He's very inconsistent, loving, but then also retreating, which leaves Rory and Lorelai really longing for stability and longing for more. But later in the season, he becomes more consistent with his actions towards his new family, very triggering for Lorelai and Rory. But that shows that he is becoming more secure as well. And that was bad timing, because I think it was called his new girl was becoming pregnant in the moment he actually did want to commit truly to Lorelai. If he would he have truly followed through with this? Who knows? But yeah, that's what we just see it in there. But all we can see is later he becomes more consistent, more securely attached. While his growth is more positive for him, it's very heartbreaking for Lorelai and Rory. Although now watching it a second time, I'm still not any more heartbroken anymore, because I know exactly how it's going to end with Luke and Lorelai, and I think it's really meant to be. And I think this kind of gives us an insight of, if you are going through a heartbreak in the moment, just imagine this is your Christopher or your Max Medina, and eventually you might find your own Luke. So always have this perspective, right? But in the moment, it just feels so heartbreaking for everyone, especially for you. So again, Christopher really shows fearful, avoidant signs with more really strong avoidant tendencies. So not really anxious ones, more avoidant, and have this push and pull. He wants love and family, but really fears rejection and imperfection, and really wants independence. So that's why he's traveling. That's why he doesn't want to settle down and shows up consistently and all of this. And now in this episode, I really want to address Emily Gilmore. So Lorelai's mom and Rory's grandmother. She's a very interesting character. Someone I really had troubles to putting her in a box. I think because we really can't put her in a box. There's so much more going on. I was really back and forth between her. And usually, again, if you're back and forth, you are usually more disorganized attached. Okay. I still haven't even made up my mind. So I think she is anxious attached at the core, has disorganized edges, but then with a twist of narcissistic flavors. Okay, I think this is what I'm gonna go for. But please tell me in the YouTube comments what you are thinking about Emily. Okay, she drives a lot of this go energy, which is very typical for someone with anxiety, because with anxiety wants us to control the situation and solve the things, and that's why I think she's not avoidant at the core, because she's really proactive against things. And so constantly planning and overscheduling and trying to control outcome, situation, people, just to feel safe and in control. Sorry, my voice is crackling because I'm still a little bit sick. But bear with me, okay? This is important here. So at the same time, she shows avoidant and a little disorganized edges in her emotional distance, in her lack of being vulnerable as well. So she's between warmth, right? We do know and kind of have a heart for her, I think, because I do care for her. So she is warm, but then she's very critical, hypercritical, and retreating when intimacy or vulnerability feels overwhelming for her. So that's why there's also some narcissistic tendencies involved, I think, which only made me realize later on, which I'm gonna go through as well, because her patterns is like she often sees Lorelai and Rory even as an extension of herself, which is very typical for someone who is either a narcissist or really has narcissistic tendencies. So their behavior and manners and achievements and everything they do, she always links back to herself, to how it reflects back on her, and the Gilmore name, and is tied to her self-worth. And when they fall short, or let's talk about more when Lorelai falls short and of her expectations and experiences, she feels deep shame. She attacks and shames Lorelai, gives her lectures and criticizes her, and she can't basically do nothing right, which is this typical thing of narcissistic parents. They have this one person they put on a pedestal, like this golden child, which, by the way, Rory here, because they don't have a second child. Lorelai doesn't have a sibling, but I think they use Rory in this case. Rory can't do anything wrong. And then they have the scapegoat, which is Lorelai. And they create these unintentional roles for, their kids or even, their granddaughter, to protect their own ego. And that makes usually the siblings, create this jealousy and competition in each other, and everything that even Rory does wrong, they twist back on Lorelai. Oh yeah, Lorelai should have educated Rory better, when I think Rory went out with Jess and Jess crashed the car. Whose fault was it? Of course, Lorelai's. Anything that's happening and going wrong is Lorelai's fault. Anything that's going right is because Rory did something right. So, for example, Emily funds Rory's children's tuition, but emphasizes achievement over encouragement as well, sending the message that success matters more than feelings, and she expects really higher levels of perfectionism in social events, in weddings, milestones, celebrations, the way they dress, the way they speak, everything, especially achievements, which would be projecting her high standards onto her family, because again, she sees them as extensions of herself onto the family name. And when Rory or Lorelai don't follow really and don't conform, Emily may retreat behind rules and pointed critique or businesses, masking her anxiety while preserving really control. Her slight tendencies to narcissism also appear in her need for admiration. So she thrives when others reflect well on her experiences, intense shame when they don't meet her standards. And despite all of this, Emily does provide consistent practical support when you think about this. So she is reliable and does arrange financial support and social connections. Sometimes I definitely think as a way to control, because if she is the one who lends the money, again, they have to come by every Friday for a dinner. But I think it's not just as a way of control. I think it's also as a way to create and keep up the connection, especially with the golden child, Rory. But I think also with Lorelai. I think deep down they do truly love her, and I don't think she's a true narcissist. I think there is definitely love involved too. I think the narcissistic tendencies are very, very low, but there are some involved for sure. So she also shows moments of genuine care and loyalty, revealing that her avoidance and disorganized edges coexist with an underlying desire for connection in various ways. Because when I think about Emily, my heart warms up, because I'm usually a person who has lots of empathy for someone. I can see through someone's shell easily. It doesn't mean I justify all of the things she does, and I do agree Lorelai has to set boundaries with her and all of this, but there is more going on behind all of this. So the push-pull between, closeness and control, warmth and judgment, and admiration and shame creates this complex, huge dynamic that both drives and destabilizes her relationship with Lorelai and Rory. So, and then the question is, I've seen online people sometimes saying that if Emily is a narcissist or has tendencies, Lorelai is for sure. And I kind of disagree with this. As we said, Emily is not a narcissist, but she has slight tendencies, very slight. Lorelai is different. However, we don't want to ignore her also controlling tendencies here. So Lorelai is very interesting, right? We touched on her before, and now let's go a little bit deeper here, because she's trying so hard to escape her family's control. She always wants to push back against everything her parents put onto her, the strict rules, their need for control. Every part of her life is against what her parents wanted for her. Just truly follow her own independent path. So moving out early, running her own inn, dating who she wants, nothing like her parents would want it for her. That's her own way of saying, I'm not going to be trapped ever anymore in your own little world, right? But here's the interesting part. Sometimes she ends up trying to control Rory as well. Like when she invites Dean, for example, over to Rory's first date, that is a little bit, overstepping the line, taking back control. At first glance, it looks like controlling behavior, but it's not narcissistic, I would say, definitely not. Because if we look at it deeper, Lorelai does apologize quite fast, trying to come up with lots of various solutions, what they can do, uninvite him, if she should remove herself into a different room and all of this. And she does take accountability and acknowledge her own wrongdoing in the situation. A true narcissist would never do that. So she's not trying to really manipulate or dominate in that way, even though it was definitely a red flag. She's acting from fear of history repeating herself over really being dominating in this way. So the root cause is completely different here. Her parents' patterns were so rigid and controlling that Lorelai sometimes overcompensates really, and she doesn't want Rory to be trapped or shaped the same way, she was. So she's protecting Rory or wanting to protect Rory, but it comes out in a, slight controlling way. Let's put it this way. And also, this is more anxious, disorganized again, I would say, more, disorganized tendencies rather than narcissism. Lorelai learns early that control and approval were tied to safety. So her parents' love was conditional and very strict. So she both rebels and overreacts. And this rebellion is her independence. The small controlling moments with Rory come from really anxious behaviors. She wants to prevent Rory from being hurt or shaped by rigid rules so she can self-reflect, take accountability and adjust, which shows more self-awareness and empathy, I would say, not true narcissism, where, reflection is very rare. And thinking about this, didn't she call her hotel later Independence Inn? So Independence Inn, maybe that's, leading point to the way that she really, really strives on independence. So in short, Lorelai's controlling moments are rooted in her upbringing and her fear of repetition, not a desire of power or ego boost. That's a huge difference here. So it's very human and understandable, for example. And now, of course, I have to continue with Richard. So Richard, he is a very textbook avoidant attachment style, so very dismissive. Richard grew up in a structured, achievement-focused household where emotional expression was very minimal, practical, was valued over vulnerability. As you can see, no one really in the show is very good at vulnerability, if you can, now see overall. So from a very early age, she learned that love and approval were tied to success, the performance, rather than emotional closeness. So expressing deep feelings was likely discouraged or modeled as unnecessary, teaching him that emotions are risky and best managed with control and detachment. So Richard's attachment style shows classic avoidant or dismissive traits. So he is consistently prioritizing his work, reading his newspaper, even when he goes to parties or invites. So he is prioritizing status and practical solutions over emotional connection, really, to retreat rather than engage in emotional conflict. So love is expressed through actions, provision rather than words or physical affection as well. So while he is reliable though, and pretty steady. He does struggle to express his words of affection or handle emotional intensity really well, and often withdraws when confronted with emotional charged situations. So for example, he supports Rory's children years financially and practically as well, but rarely really engages emotionally through Rory's struggles, or even Lorelai's, of course not. Then he also retreats during family dinners or when there's conflict happening, using very short answers. He also rarely hugs or shows physical affection, preferring distance as a strategy to, this is what I've known from the past, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I feel comfortable with. I don't see the point in doing all of these things, right? And he handles Emily's emotional panic or demands with composed, rational responses, maintaining control rather than empathy. And during Lorelai's fights, he withdraws rather than entertains emotionally charged discussions, showing avoidance rather than insecurity. So Richard is a textbook avoidant figure. He can love and deeply care, but does it really through actions, a little bit like Luke, but he's a little bit stronger, more typical avoidant attached, and really does, avoid emotional intimacy. He really does it to protect himself. Emotions feel risky. He maintains distance and control as well, while he can appear still steady and reliable. His detachment can feel cold and inaccessible, especially to those, maybe who are more anxious leaning or who have a disorganized attachment style. And so from the outside perspective, people might think, oh my God, they don't have no romantic spark going on, they're not very close. But if you really understand who an avoidant attachment style is, we can see that they are very loving, but they just have really strong fears with physical affection, let's say, and even words of affirmation. And that's why most of my clients really who are anxiously attached and who are really attracted to this kind of avoidant attached people, they really struggle and feel anxious when their partner is not able to comfort them through words of affirmation, and definitely not with physical actions, because often someone who's anxiously attached, their love language is physical touch, words of affirmation, and then additional quality time. In part 2, I'm going to talk about Rory, Jess, Dean, Logan, and let me know in the YouTube comments if you want me to do also a little bit on Suki, Lane, Jackson, and any other characters, because I can do this as well. But again, this is a little bit of a longer deep dive, but I really need your input here if you want me to do just the core characters, anyone else. So by the way, and if you are anxiously attached, especially if you need support and you need reassurance and validation, and you are always attaching these kind of avoidant attachment styles, and are not sure what you can do and becoming more securely attached, I have online coaching, either via one-on-one coaching calls or even via WhatsApp coaching, meaning I can guide you, on your phone whenever you're on the way, whenever you have just experienced a trigger, an argument, or something is going on, like your partner's going a little bit quiet or a little bit more silence, when you don't get the words of affirmation or the physical touch from your partner you're craving, and you want to understand what's going on, I can guide you and coach you through this. Only if you're very coachable, meaning you're very open for my suggestions, when you are able to take full accountability for yourself, meaning you don't want to blame what your partner does, you really want to focus on what can you do in the situation. Because in truth is, we can't change what our partner does, we can't change and hope for they will change eventually, but we can work on our anxiety, give ourselves the love languages we are craving, and come then into the relationship from a way of our cup is full. We are not empty. We know we are worthy of love. We are enough. We don't need their love, affection, reassurance, and safety, because we are already safe and loved already. And it's just that if they give this to us, this adds another whole layer to our life. If you have an anxious attachment style, we often think we're kind of starving of love because we don't give enough the things we are craving, and kind of because we have been raised in an inconsistently comforting, safe, loving environment where sometimes, there was love and affection, sometimes not. We now subconsciously mix up our partner with our caregiver and kind of hope They will fix things for us. They will make us, in air quotes, feel secure and safe and loved. And think, oh, they're now our therapist, they're our parent. But, it's not very sexy if we think, okay, my man is my dad now, right? The truth is, you don't need your partner to show up differently. You don't need more reassurance and more podcasts and more self-help books. You don't need to fix yourself. You are already perfect the way you are. We just want to unlearn patterns we have learned as a way of protecting ourselves. If you have an anxious attachment style, there's nothing wrong with you. Anxiety is not bad, but sometimes it's just overreacting. Like, anxiety tells you, oh my god, your partner is the bad person. In fact, though, they're just triggering old wounds inside of you. And if you are ready to work on your past, because right now your partner might be triggering this, or the people you are dating, then I'm ready to coach you and be open for a chat. Either you can hop on a free call with me to see if you're the right match for my coaching programs, either the WhatsApp coaching or my coaching subscription via video calls, or I have mini courses available and also free resources you can check out. If you have an anxious attachment style, there's a quiz, lots of guides, like a flowchart to check, what you can do if you're worrying, if you're overthinking. I'll see you in the next episode where I go more into more characters of the Gilmore Girls and really truly understanding attachment theory through that lens. Lots of love, yours Jula. And remember, change in your relationship starts with you. Thought by thought, action by action, and now episode by episode. Bye bye.